from ESCOM, from the presidency, Mr. Rudy Dix, colleagues from all media houses, good morning. My name is Nomonde Mnukwa, the Acting Director General of the GCIS. You are most welcome to this weekly Ministers' Briefing session, updating us in terms of the progress in the implementation of the Energy Action Plan. We apologize for starting a bit later. We had some media houses that requested that we give them a little bit more of time to ensure that they are connected live. Colleagues, on that note, I will then welcome the Honorable Minister of Electricity, Dr. Ramokgopa, to come and brief us. Minister.
No, thank you very much, Acting DG, Sis Nomonde, and let me once more take the opportunity to thank the media houses for having made it possible, first to be here and also to share with the country where we are in relation to the performance of the grid. I think it's an important point that Sis Nomonde made, that we're on schedule to start on time. Of course, the media houses requested that we start five minutes late to accommodate their technical requirements. So let me just take this opportunity first to express our appreciation to South Africans. We've gone through a very, very difficult 3 days since we got a significant amount of reprieve over the past 21 days. We have been able to sustain a relatively healthy performance of the units, and of course we experience a significant reduction in the available capacity, I think starting on Thursday. And we had to take measures that are meant to protect the grid, and we went to stage 6 load shedding. So I really want to express our most sincere and profuse apology for having taken you through a very, very difficult stage of intensive load shedding. I'm making this point because first, load shedding is unacceptable. I think that's the first point. The second part is that going to higher stages of load shedding, especially stage 6, should not become the norm. And if anything, that should constitute an extraordinary occurrence. And we are going to make it the case that to the extent that for purposes of protecting the grid, there's a need for us to initiate stage 6 load shedding. I'm going to stand before the country, the public, and apologize profusely. And I'm not in any way suggesting that load shedding is acceptable, but I think the intensity of load shedding that goes beyond stage 4 is something that should become unacceptable, and it's something that to the degree that we can, from a technical point of view, that we are able to avoid it, we will do everything possible to avoid it. And I'm raising this because I know that it would have disrupted life, it would have disrupted businesses, especially those who are operating over the weekends. People would have had activities, and that would have been significantly disrupted. And for that, we want to profusely apologize. And of course, like I said, load shedding of any stage is unacceptable. But there's a few things that we have learned out of this experience. So the first one is a reconfirmation of the fact that the grid remains vulnerable and susceptible to plummeting availability of megawatts. So it's something that has been reaffirmed, it's something that we have known. And the point that I had been making consistently is that although we have seen that a significant amount of reprieve over the 21 days, what we had always known was that we should be able to get to a stage where we are able to build first resilience, reliability of these units, but also create an additional buffer so that as and when these units fail, as is the case and the norm with any engineering component, there's a sufficient reserve margin that will allow us an opportunity not to engage in any stage of load shedding and or intensification of load shedding. So that's the first part. And then the second part that we know is the following, is that whilst we committed to the decarbonization agenda, when you have inclement weather, when you have a situation as we experienced on Tuesday and Wednesday, we had parts of Gauteng experiencing snow. And of course, when you are given those conditions, you know that you are starved of the sun. Essentially, you have cloudy conditions, and therefore, you are not getting any privilege of getting support from your PV solar. So what that means is that those who've got taken the self-initiative of ensuring that they install solar panels, batteries, and inverters, they also had to draw from the grid. And in addition to that, they also had to draw from the grid to recharge their batteries. And of course, what that means is elevated levels of demand. So it's not only the fact that you are losing out on and on the availability of renewables, in particular PV, but you are also adding additional pressure on the grid because you need the grid to support you to be able to recharge the batteries, so that as and when you need to engage them, the battery capacity is available for exactly that purpose. And then the third one is when there's the meeting point of plummeting generation capacity and elevated demand, then we are in significant trouble. And the point I've been making consistently is that when we resolve the load shedding problem, our measure of the degree to which we are able to stand before the public and say load shedding has been resolved has little to do with summer conditions, but it has everything to do with our ability to be able to meet demand that is 34,000 megawatts, which is essentially the peak that we had projected for winter. So we might be going into summer periods. Of course, demand is going to go down. We are expecting that the trend line in relation to the improvement of generation capacity is going to improve. We're expecting additional units to come on stream, and I'll share with you what will be coming on stream in the next few months. And of course, we have been sharing with you is the totality of that which will be available. The question should be asked if that is sufficient to help us to meet the peak demand in winter. And if the answer is no, then you are not out of load shedding. Essentially, load shedding is suspended until a later date, and that later date will come when we go into a winter period. So our task is twofold. So the first one is that in the shortest possible space of time end load shedding, and then make it possible that you are creating additional capacity and buffer so that as we enter the next winter season, you've got sufficient generating capacity to be able to meet those winter conditions. And of course, in the long run, like I said, for us to be able to build resilience and energy sovereignty for the country, we need to create additional generation capacity that is going to meet the projected growth in the country, or support rather the projected growth in the country. So I thought that I must make those points, that there are significant lessons that we have drawn out of this experience, and of course those lessons will be factored into how we are beginning to respond to load shedding going into the future. So very briefly, I'll take you through what has been the experience. So the trend line has been positive over the past 21 days, like I said, on multiple indicators, and I'll take you through those multiple indicators. But what we had seen the past week is that on almost all of those indicators, there's been a reversal, and I'm confident that we are recovering out of that. And I'm sure that we'll share with you that recovery effort. So the first one was the capacity available. So you can see that we started the week at 28,735 megawatts. And of course, the average over that period was about 27,700 megawatts. And in fact, what is more interesting is the 12th of July and also the 13th of July, where we're sitting at 27,000 megawatts, which is, I think, the lowest in the past 21 days or so. And then if you read that together with what I refer to as that PM focus, so you can see that the highest demand that we have had in this period is 32,025 megawatts. And then you can see that it then remained relatively at those levels. So demand went up, and then generation plummeted, and that's what necessitated, if you like, that stage 6 load shedding. And of course, it wasn't helped by the fact that we had not replenished our resources. That's water for pump storage, and also issues around the open cycle gas turbines. Of course, we had depleted those resources. So essentially that ate into the available capacity. So at the time when we needed it the most, we were not able to draw from those. So what is a big lesson from that? It's a planning question on our side, and it's an issue that we had raised with the ESCOM colleagues. That essentially what those units are meant to do, especially your picking station, is to come into the picture at the time that they are needed. And of course, we've been running them essentially as base load, and that's what explained the depletion of those resources. So the first one of those indicators that had gone south negative was the availability as a result of lack of planning as it relates to the issues around the open cycle gas turbines, and also how we're able to replenish the water resources. But like I said, it's also a function of the fact that we have been running them essentially as base load, given the intensity of the demand. And of course, the colleagues, I think, they were caught off guard there. They were not able to replenish, and it's something that we're working on. And I really want to commend the team at ESCOM who have been able to recover, and that's why we have gone to lower stages of load shedding. And of course, it's desirable that we go to even lower stages of load shedding. And then on the issues of planned outages, like I said the last time, is that once you have a significant amount of available generating capacity, then that gives you, if you like, an opportunity to take out the units in a planned manner to be able to fix them. And remember, I'd been saying to you the last time that, as you can see, we opened the week at about 4,100 megawatts of planned outages because we had the capacity, the demand was not as intense, and that gave us a window for opportunity maintenance. Of course, as we're experiencing this difficulty, then you had to delay, if you like, your planned maintenance so that you are able to exploit these units, so that you are able to close the gap between demand and generation, and you are able to ensure that you undermine the intensification of load shedding. Again, there on that score, we had gone south. So we scored a negative because what we desire of doing is to ensure that we continue to maintain higher levels of planned outages so that when we bring these units back, we know that there's some degree of comfort that they are reliable, they are going to give us the kind of efficiency, the output that is desirous, that approximate, if you like, their design capacity. And then the other area of where we had gone south is our unplanned capacity loss factor. So you can see that we opened the week at 1,500. On the 14th of July, you can see from the 13th of July, we've been adding 2,000 additional megawatts of failures of these units. When we went to the 14th, there's about 3,700 megawatts of these units that had failed. Again, it's a negative. It's something that requires attention. Like I said, we'll continue to improve this area of work. I mean, the lowest that we had achieved during this winter period, I think we're at sub 14,000 megawatts, about 13,700 or so. If you compare that lowest period and you compare the period on the 14th of July, you can see that it's an additional about 5,000 megawatts. And this is interesting because what it does, the picture that we had experienced over the last 4 days or so, it approximates our winter, our west projection. You remember we generated 3 scenarios. So the first scenario was the worst case scenario was that our unplanned capacity loss factor will be about 18,000 megawatts plus, and that's what we had experienced. And of course, you can see that the demand now began to surpass 32,000 megawatts, at least on those 2 indicators. We're approximating the worst case scenario. And of course, we went through the period that we went through, and of course, again, our available capacity also went down. So this is what I refer to as the perfect storm. So we got hit by that perfect storm. Available capacity went down, and then demand went surged up. Perfect storm, and what is the result of perfect storm is the intensification of load shedding, and there are significant lessons that will be drawn out of that, and will continue to ensure that there's some degree of improvement. And I'm very confident on the ability of Mr. Numalo, the head of generation, and the team. They are alive to the situation, and of course they are the first ones who will tell you that collectively we are going to plan better going forward. And then the other area of a negative indicator is the partial load losses. So you can see that we're beginning to improve the partial load losses. When we opened the week the last time, the 10th, we're at 4,100 megawatts. Now we close at 6,091 megawatts. Over the period of 5 days is about 5,899. Just to recap, partial load losses, the units are generating, but they are not generating at levels of their design capacity. They are at significantly lower capacity. It's different from the unplanned capacity loss factor, the one that I just explained of the 18,000 megawatts. There it's like a car is being parked on the side of the road, and you are waiting for a tow truck to take you to the workshop. So it's out of service. You are going to fix it. You don't know how much time you'll need because you don't know what is wrong with that. And that undermines our ability to come back and to bring the units back quicker, because it's not planned out of its own volition, just decide to not to give you, of course, the megawatts that you want. Of course, it's a function of, amongst others, issues of poor maintenance over a period of time. I've explained the issues around the PM peak. The PM peak, someone was asking me, why not the morning peak? The PM peak is more intense than the morning peak, so it's the best indicator of what is your maximum demand, and that's why you are reflecting on the PM peak. And then on the issue of outage slips, again, we have gone south in this period. So when I met with you and I gave this update the last time, I think we're at 1,351 megawatts of outage slips. Just a recap, outage slips, it means that we are not bringing the units at the promised date that we had thought will bring these units. So essentially, we are not meeting our own targets. And as a result, that undermines our projections with regards to the levels of load shedding, because that which we thought will be on stream is not on stream, and as a result, we are not able to lower the stages of load shedding. And that's a credibility issue, because when I stand before the public and say we are going to lower stages of load shedding, the public does believe. If you don't lower them, then these briefings are meaningless, because there is nothing that people can draw out of these conversations, because we can't keep to that promise. So it's a credibility issue. So when we promise to bring the units back on this date, they must come back on that date. And of course, like I said, it's a planning issue again. When you take out the units, the spares must be available, the technical capacity must be available and able to ensure that we address whatever the failures are, and then we are able to return these units. And again, we have gone south. So what has happened? Demand has gone up. As demand has surged to those higher levels of about 32,000 megawatts, the availability has gone down. The availability has gone down because more units have failed. I've been able to show you that we have added another 3,000 megawatts on the units that have failed. And again, those units that we thought will come back and provide some relief did not come back on time. And that's why you have that 1,863, and that's the perfect storm I'm referring to. And when you have that perfect storm, the only instrument that is left at the disposal of the system operator is to ensure that you intensify load shedding, and that's something that is regrettable. And I'm confident that we are going to continue on this trend line, learn from these lessons, and I'll show you the units that will be coming back on stream. And again, I'm emphasizing the point that it is important that when you say these units are coming back on stream, they do come back on stream, because it's a credibility issue. Otherwise, if they don't come back on stream, as I'm going to share with you, then that talks to the outage slips. And therefore, we are not a reliable partner. Because that also helps industry and households to plan, because we don't take for granted when we issue this media statement by ESCOM, and also when we have this briefing, that is integral to people's planning. They are able to, if you like, reconfigure their lives to be able to ensure that they accommodate the intensity of load shedding. Of course, we want to come out of this situation so that people can live their lives normally. And then now we have averaged this performance over a period of time, just to show that with the kind of a dip that we have experienced, that has not undermined the trend line. And what is that trend line? You can see that compared to the earlier periods of May, the month of May, we still are better off. Of course, we have surpassed what that indicator was in relation to the outage sleep. So we are able to indicate to you that even with the partial load losses, we are still better than where we were in May. We are able to indicate to you that also with regards to planned outages, of course, I did say that we had intensified those planned outages because we had over the period an additional capacity, and of course there was a window of opportunity that allows us a space to be able to take the units out at our own volition, and then we're able to return them. And of course, on the average capacity available over that period was still better than where we were in May, but significantly lower than where we were in the last period of June. So we want to go back to that indicator of June, and I did say to the team, when we come back, our measure of performance in relation to the trend line is not against the lowest period in this when we started this effort. It must be measured against what was the best period. And then let's see how we do against that best period. Because that's the best indicator of whether you are able to sustain this trend line or whether that was just a sheer stroke of luck. So it's important that when I go forward, I'll show you now what has been the best week of performance. It has been June, that the week of the 26th to the 30th. And then when we do the relative comparisons, it must be against that best period so that we have a better appreciation of whether we're able to sustain this performance or whether this is a fluke or, like I said, a stroke of luck. And I did say before that our colleagues are hard at work. I'm more than confident about their ability to address this. And of course, this is another way I can showcase, if you like, what has been the performance. Like I said, the generation capacity is a function of your units failing on their own, which is that unplanned loss capacity loss factor. We want to keep that one down. It's a function also on your partial load losses. We want the units to operate closer to their design capacity. We want to lift that up. And then it's a function of also your outage sleeps. We want the units to come back on the date as promised. If we stick to that date, then it means that we are not defaulting on the outage sleeps. And the aggregation of those then gives you a capacity, your generation capacity. And those are the indicators that we are following to ensure that we are able to improve the situation. For me, it's a busy slide, very technical, but necessary. You remember what I shared with you, that when we go and assess the performance of the generation capacity, really EAF doesn't tell you the whole story. It doesn't tell you the real story, the energy availability factor, because it's an aggregation of the 14 power stations. Of course, you are able to read it better, then you have a better appreciation. But where we are, you need to go a level lower than that. You need to go to a station, and then you need to go to a unit in that station and ask the questions, what are the reasons for failure? So what is common here, which you might not see here? It's something called the boiler tube leaks. So that's the persistent failure that we're experiencing across the entire power station. So it's an area of a technical shortfall that requires our collective attention. Of course, there are a multiplicity of reasons. It has to do sometimes with the quality of coal. You just need to understand what are the operational parameters of those units to really try and understand what the root causes are. And in our conversation with the technical team there at Eskom is that we must just focus on this thing called boiler tube leaks. And in my other conversation with some of the leading universities in the country, just to try and understand if we can just get people who just study this thing called boiler tube leaks so that we are able to help the situation going into the future. This is our albatross, this thing called boiler tube leaks. And the majority of the units that had failed, that had gone out, is as a result of boiler tube leaks. But what's the biggest story that is projected here? Is that the units we're expecting that there's 2 units that are going to return to service by the 14th of July. And these units are going to give us 1,305 megawatts. And then we're expecting that between the 15th and the 18th of July, we're going to have 12 units coming back, and that's giving us 5,438. It's a very, very important measure, that. And I was saying to the team that we are going to share with the general public. And of course, when I come back, I'll report on to you on how we're fared against that projection. Because if we miss that 5,439, we don't return the 12 units, we return the units lower than that, it means that the difference is what has gone into the outage slips. And that's a very, very important slide. So we're saying that between the 14th and the 18th, we should come back with about 6,800 megawatts of additional generation capacity. And you can see that is going to boost, if you like, our performance going into the future. So I thought this is very important. And maybe just to share with you on the issues of security, of course, Minister Kgosientsho couldn't join us this morning. There's something very urgent he had to attend to, but I'm simply going to share with you the numbers because we have been delaying just sharing with you the numbers. On what sits behind the numbers, the technical capacity and the like, I'm sure that at the right moment, when Minister Kgosientsho and the generals are here, they'll be able to share this with you. Remember, I did say the following, that we've got a structure called the National Electricity Crisis Committee, led by DG Baleni and, of course, Mr. Rudy Dix, and it's comprised of about 9 work streams. And work stream number 5 is solely focused on the issues around security, crime, and safety there at Eskom. So I thought that is important that at a very high level, an aggregation of what has been happening, because we do get to encounter these questions from time to time. Over the period, the 1st of April 2022 to date, there's 2,147 Eskom cases that have been reported to the South African Police Service. And about 1,586 of these 2,147 are under investigation. And to date, they've made, or since that period of April the 1st, 2022, they've made 126 arrests have been made. So you can see that, of course, it's gradual, but it's meaningful progress that we are making. Just to make the point that in addition to the technical solutions that we are seeking to resolve the issues of Eskom, we are also focused on addressing some of the underlying problems, which has been fraud, corruption, and issues of security at Eskom. And when we thought that we must just lift the kind of work that has been done over that period. And of course, we do share with you what some of these issues are on the operational activities. Just to say that the unit is located at Eskom, embedded there, and they also get to interact with the various police stations that are attached to the various power stations. And they do make regular visits, not just to power stations, but also to coal yards, because they are trying to understand, if you like, the configuration of the anatomy, if you like, of these criminal activities. And they do also go to backward of generation. They do go to the source, the coal yards, the number of visits that they've made to power station, but they also go to second-hand dealers just to ensure that people can account for their activities. And we do elaborate on what has been the activities in relation to that, the issues around scrap metal dealers and recyclers. You can see that they have visited about 15,000 and 43, they've done compliance inspections so that we're able to undermine, if you like, and cut the arteries of this syndicate so that we allow ESCOM to do its work going forward. And of course, we also try to provide a value of what has been physically recovered. But I think there's a greater value that almost from a security point of view is intangible, but from a technical point of view are able to account for it. I mean, if we can show, we're able to illustrate that some of the megawatts recovered are as a result of the work of our colleagues in the Intelligence and Security Agency, you can see that number will far exceed the 93 million. Essentially, the additional megawatts that are made available to the South African economy are getting closer or approximate condition of normality. That has got a measure, but of course they do the more tangible ones. What is it that they've recovered? And in rand value terms, is just shy of 94 million rands over that period, the 1st of April to date. So we thought that we must also share that with you, and I must say that, like I said, every time we do every effort to ensure that from this experience we are able to improve. The past 3 days, very difficult. We know part of it really has to do with us dropping the ball from the planning point of view in relation to the replenishment of the open cycle gas turbines, that is the diesel component and the water. And like I said, part of it can be explained by the fact that we ran this close to if you like, base load conditions, and that did not give colleagues an opportunity to be able to replenish. Is an area of work that we are giving attention to. And like I said, by the 18th, we expect to return over 5,000 megawatts of generating capacity. And I'm very confident that the team will keep to that so that we don't go into outage sleeps and we're able to attend to the demand as expected. Thank you very much, Sis Nomonde. We'll take the question.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Colleagues, we're now going to be getting to questions to the Minister. Let me quickly introduce the technical experts who are supporting the Minister. Just next to him, we have Mr. Rudy Dix, who's from the Presidency. And next to him, we have Ms. Daphne Mukwena, she's from ESCOM. So the Minister will call on them as and when they are required to come through. We will then start, colleagues, with the questions from the room. And then when we are done, we then move to the questions online. Let me quickly take, I see one hand. Okay, the second one. Any other? Okay, the third one there at the back. We'll start with you, ma'am, and then we'll go to you, and then we will take the third hand from the back. Thank you.
Good morning, Minister Antoinette. Good morning, Minister Antoinette Slugger from our port. If you could just help me to understand, do you mean that if the resources, the diesel and the water resources were used more efficiently in the past few days, that it would have been unnecessary to go to stage 6? And if so, how were they supposed to use it? Because the way I understand it, I would have thought then, if they didn't use it at first, then we would have been at stage 6 earlier. So if you could just explain that to us. And then also, we do understand that a lot of diesel is being used at the moment, and I don't think one criticizes that. But where will the money come from? Because that is what has put ESCOM into financial trouble in the past. Thank you.
Okay, can we also have your name and the media house that you represent? She did say. She did say. Okay.
From our board.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I missed that.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It's Zianda Tobo from Newsroom Africa. Minister, my questions are mainly security related. Unfortunately, your counterpart isn't here, sorry. but perhaps maybe ESCOM can enlighten me. What about, there seems to be a lot of complaints from citizens related to scams, related to solar panels. Is there an education drive that's underway? People are still struggling even to know what's the right kind of inverter to buy, etc. And then the soldiers that were deployed to power stations, has that yielded any results? Are there any tangibles that you're able to share in this regard? Thank you.
Thank you. We had the colleague there at the back. You said it.
Sorry, that's fine. It's Peter from KFM. That's the same question that my colleague just asked regarding the SNDF. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Any other colleagues in the room? All right, I think you can take us through the online questions.
Okay, we have a few questions for the first round. I'll start with 5. This is Helmut from Media 24. How many hours a day are there in Muller and Drakensberg pump storage schemes being run? William Hahn from Network 24. Regarding ESCOM's load shedding pilot project in 4 weeks, have there been any public consultation processes? Sorry. Some residents are upset about the difficulties the program brings about for their inverters and batteries. This is also a question from William Horn. Has the minister started discussions with Treasury regarding options for additional funding or assistance to ESCOM to augment its 30 billion OCGT budget, since it is running out faster than planned? The other question is from Siphelele Kula at Business Report. What is the latest on the 100 megawatts we improved from Mozambique? Have these additional capacity already been installed in our national grid? Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Then we'll allow the minister to respond to those questions. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for those questions. I think Becky is on the line from ESCOM. I don't know how we connect to. Brabek, you want to come in there on the, and then I'll come in on the rest of the question.
Good morning, Honorable Minister and Media. Honorable Minister, I couldn't get some of the questions clearly, but the one that maybe I can start with is the one with regard to, let me talk to the issue of the utilization of the reserve, which is the pump storages and the OCGTs. I think colleagues will remember on Monday last week, since Sunday evening, Monday and Tuesday, we had that 3,000 megawatt rise on the demand side, and then it also, like Minister indicated, coincided with the boiler two failures that we had. So that those 2 initial days we've used, then the pump storage is much longer than you would normally do, because as you know that the pump storage is which is most tracked, inspected. In Bula, we use them like in the morning peaks, take them off during the days when we also, like a day like today, where we have enough solar as well to come through, and then again in the evening. So that day they ran a bit longer, which then resulted in them not getting enough time to replenish, coupled with the number of tube leaks that we have at the multiple stations from Monday and Tuesday in particular as well. So that's what really caused us to increase the stages on Wednesday, just to make sure that the system operators still maintain the good reserve. On the point of the hours for those stations, like I'm saying, it depends on how you ran. When they are full, you would get like Tingula, say 100 hours, and then part of those hours, the the system operator they need to keep it as reserve for black start facilities, so you can't run all of them. So once it gets below certain hours, then the system operator then will start to preserve them until we've recovered. Like we have indicated towards the end of the week that the plan was to recover by the weekend, and when we started to bring the unit back as well, that were off for the boiler failures. Since Saturday and yesterday and also today, we are continuing to return the unit. But that is really what resulted to the higher utilization of the open cycle gas turbine and the pump storage. Thanks, Minister. So some of the questions I couldn't get them clear in Minister. If someone there can just indicate the one that I need to fill as well, I'll do that. Apologies, I couldn't join that site because of other commitment this side as well. Thanks.
Yes, on the SNDF, the impact thereof, as ESCOM, I think we've seen a good or benefit for them being there. As I'm not sure if you would know that the last, in fact, sabotage report, sabotage incident that was reported was in February. So obviously, right now we are experiencing petty crime. Then there were cable stolen. In the last, from the 12th up until the 16th, there's about 3 cable theft incidents that were reported. But obviously, with the SNDF being there, we managed to arrest those perpetrators. Thank you. Yeah, with the issue of, I'm not sure if the question was on load limiting in the four-ways area, because what we said was that the load limiting will only be done between stages 1 and 4. And yes, just like any other pilot project, we did experience some teething issues, although our technical teams did go on site to deal with all the teething issues that were reported to us. But customers, as we know that it's ESCOM customers that we are piloting this load limiting project to. So all the customers can contact ESCOM on our call center, which is the 08600 37566 number, or on our chatbot, and we will respond to their issues. But we do have positive feedback, by the way, from most of the customers, because with the load limiting to 10 amps, most of the customers can do what they normally cannot do when they are load shed, which is obviously those that are working from home can still have their computers charged, can still have their security systems, operating, can still have their Wi-Fi operating, especially since we had kids on holidays, so it was a good week for them. Unfortunately, when we then implemented stage 6, then the load limiting gets suspended. Thank you.
Maybe just to Sianda's question with regards to the possible scams associated with the quality of the solar panels. So what the ministry has initiated is a discussion with the major stakeholders in the state who are responsible for licensing and regulating some of these components that gets to be manufactured and or imported into the country. In particular, the South African Bureau of Standard. We're also talking to the Institute of Electrical Engineers, but the body that regulates the fraternity of the electrical profession in the country, so that we're able to streamline if you like, the issues of the accreditation of installers, but also address the issues with regards to the quality of the components that are being manufactured, be batteries, inverter or solar, or those that are being imported into the country. There's a flurry we have seen over a period of time as a result of our objective conditions here at home, the issues of load shedding, that there's a significant amount of appetite for people to install, and as a result, there are some unscrupulous players in the system who are bringing into the country, if you like, components that are not certified. And we know the dangers of what this can cause, significant fires. I saw one of the major telcos, of course, they did say that it had to do with the solar panels. Of course, we'll wait for an investigation. So the point I'm making is that we're doing everything possible to address that. And once we have done that, it's just to caution the average consumer, just to say that they must insist on the certification of this component, SAB as approved as a body that regulates, if you like, certification of such components. And the second one is to just the licensing of the people that installs. Otherwise, you are exposed, and I'm not sure if your insurance will kick in if that's the case. So we're trying to work with the players in the space, I think, as a ministry. And of course, that is also informed by the fact that I did indicate that we're completing discussions with our peers to run a major program on training of young people, the Department of Labor, for purposes of placement and the payment of these trainees once they have completed. The Department of Science and Technologies, working with Minister Nzimande on designing if you like, modules on how they can be trained, of course, in collaboration with the various TVETs, and then the SITAs will pay them once they're in training, and of course, the Department of Small Business, because some of them, they have to be organized in a manner that they are the ones who will take the responsibility of employing people for the rollout of this program going into the future. The Department of Public Works and Infrastructure will be, I think, unveiling a government-led program on the retrofitting of government buildings to address the efficiency of utilities, that's water and electricity. And on the electricity front, really is around the repurposing or retrofitting these buildings with regards to solar panels. And that's why it's important that we are able to tighten that area of regulation and certification, accreditation, so that we don't run into problems, as Yanda is correctly indicated. Just to Antoinette, in addition to what Becky was saying, so they've been very careful at how they engage the open cycle gas turbine for the very same reasons that you have observed. You have noted, like I did indicate the last time, in that 18% plus tariff increase that NERSA approved for ESCOM, I did indicate they build in 8 billion rands, ring fence 8 billion rands for the purchase of diesel, and in the 254 billion fiscal relief, they ring fence the 22 billion rands for the purchase of diesel. That together is about 30 billion rands. So I think what the team is doing is to work within the parameters of that 30 billion rand. Otherwise, if they exceed, someone has to pay for it, and invariably is the end consumer. To the extent that it's something that will require a consideration by Treasury, I'm sure it will come through the normal processes, and then once we have familiarized ourselves with what the true facts are, we can sit behind the team to make a case. But we are not yet there, and we really want to commend what Becky and the team have been doing. And you are right, I mean, as Becky has indicated, we've been operating, they've been on load most of the time, almost treated like base load. And of course, if they were not engaged earlier, you would have gone to higher stages of load shedding. I think the point that Becky has been making is that there's a need for us to, in how we replenish, if you like, the resources, I think it will require, we can do better, and I think the team is working on that. In the last briefing, I did indicate that through the the Newcom process. The private sector is helping us. I think we have deployed a number of private sector experts. They are working with our colleagues at Ankerleg to help on how we can deal with the issues of logistics. Remember that Ankerleg takes the diesel by road, so there's so many trucks that you can take in a day. And then if you need to burn more than what you can replenish, I think it presents problems. So they are helping us in addressing that situation. Siphelele, no, I did say the last time on the 100 megawatts, so is available. I think the ESCOM people and the Mozambican counterparts, they are at advanced stage. The only delay that was there is that there were outstanding issues in relation to monies that were owed to ESCOM by the players in Mozambique, and I'm advised that they are finding a solution to that, and once we resolve that, we can benefit from that additional 100 megawatts that I've mentioned the last time. But what is important is that it's available. There were just the legal issues with regards to what things that are historical. There are legacy issues that require to be resolved, and of course, the lawyers were helping to resolve that before we contract on the 100 megawatts, but it is available, and we're still committing to that 600 megawatts in the next 6 months, calculated from the last time when we get to make that announcement. Of course, we don't expect major problems there, because once we have cleared the issues, the legacy issues, invariably we would have cleared the path for the 600 megawatts to also come on stream in the next 6 months when it's ready. Thanks, Ms. Namon.
Thank you, Minister. We will now take the last round of hands. I note your hand. Any other colleagues in the room? We can bring the mic this side. Okay.
Minister, with regards to the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, NERSA, it has been found guilty of contempt of court last week in relation to its mandate to regulate municipalities. And it also now refuses to approve wheeling tariffs in municipalities because it contends that it's not part of the mandate to regulate small-scale embedded generation. It seems as if NERSA is really a stumbling block in the development of the industry. Are there any plans to strengthen NERSA or overhaul it? And what is your contention about NERSA's mandate with regard to wheeling tariffs at municipal level? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other colleagues from the room? None? Okay. Take us through the online questions.
Helmo from Media 24 said Helmo from Media 24. He says, I need a number for the hours per day on average of pump storage. And then Jake Stalls from Pretoria FM. What is the latest regarding the smart meter system for houses? Carol Payton, News 24. Has Robert McBride begun his assignment of investigating crime and corruption at ESCOM, or is he still waiting to get a budget from SSA? This is William Horn from Netwerk 24. What is the minister's official position on consumers adopting inverter power solutions for their homes? Do the benefits of lowering the national power demand outweigh the risks of the surges in power demand for recharging like last week during bad weather? Or is this a trend at the base problematic? Terence Kramer, Engineering News. Did Minister Ramokgopa meet with Kubek last week? And what can he confirm? Whether there has been indeed another schedule slip at Unit 1? If so, is there a possibility that both Unit 1 and Unit 2 will be out of service simultaneously later this year? What do these latest slips mean for load shedding and for Kubik securing its license for long-term operation? Ferial have 5G from Daily Maverick. Do current projections show we will be able to avoid stage 7 and 8, which was a winter risk outlined in the State of the System briefing in May 2023? Those are all the questions we have so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Minister will then, Rudy is starting?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Nomonde. Perhaps on Helmut's question, if one takes the pump storage facilities and the number of pumping hours versus generating hours as of today, for instance, right? Because it varies depending on the day, right? And so given that there's been significant recovery of the dam levels over the weekend so that they're able to utilize it during the course of the weekend, of course, lower the stages of load shedding. If one takes Drakensberg, pumping hours are about 1 hour, and that currently they have 98 hours of generation capacity. Ngula has 64 hours of generating capacity. Palmit has 9 hours of pumping and have about 51 hours of generating capacity. So that's of today, and again, it varies as we go along. Antoinette, yes. Our view is quite clear. NERSA has the responsibility on 3 sets of SSEG interventions, right? And again, there are frameworks because remember that distributors, the 185 distributors would make a decision on the pricing levels on the basis of the interventions. Already what we have done is that NERSA has issued the first intervention, which was a discussion, a framework for net billing framework, and that's about, as it is, a credit to households for the future around a net bill, for example. That is out for public consultation as it is right now. As I understand it, that the NERSA Electricity Regulatory Committee sits on the 27th of July and will consider that. Our view is also quite clear that NERSA does have a mandate on issuing frameworks both for wheeling and for a feed-in tariff. And these are important guidelines that are quite critical for distributors again. Again, it's not about setting specific price levels because those will be determined depending on the ability of the distributor to be able to determine that. And again, for example, if one uses the City of Cape Town, the City of Cape Town has developed, for example, a feed-in tariff and has set a price level at that. Many municipalities have gone ahead, for example, on the basis of utilizing, for example, Eskom as a distributor itself has also a wheeling framework, and many, and because of the introduction of private embedded generation projects, many of these projects are not at the source of where they are dispatching the electrons. They are all over the country, of course, depending on the technology that has been utilized. And if they are required to do that, they are required to dispatch it across different distributors, and therefore a wheeling framework would be in place. Our view is quite clear that we require that to happen. In NECOM, we are finalizing the wheeling framework and we're finalizing a feed-in tariff, right? So we've not yet submitted that as a framework to NERSA. As of now, what NERSA has on their table is the net billing framework.
Just to make the point that on the question around Mr. Robert McBride, we'll leave that to Eskom. It's an internal Eskom matter, so they are more competent to deal with that. I choose not to respond to that. I'm sure Eskom can give you the details at the right time, not necessarily now, not even Sis Daphne or Becky. So Eskom will engage with that at the right time. On the issues of the smart meters, of course, there are multiple programs that are happening. Some are initiated by the municipality, some are initiated by Eskom. So what part of the work that we're doing is to bring that under one umbrella. I think we're going out during the course of this week or next week just to ask the market what are the additional solutions that are available so that we're able to streamline, because you don't want multiple technologies sitting all over. I think it's important. Of course, we are not prescribing what that technology is. We just want to understand what do the various technologies have to offer. And of course, we use that as a basis for municipalities to engage a number of these players that we have identified, having gone through the rigorous process that we will be determining, I think, as a ministry. On the issues around the recharging of inverters and what is the minister's position, that question technically does not arise if you don't have a load shedding problem in the country. I guess it arises because of the additional amount of burden that is placed on the grid as a requirement for you to recharge. So I think that our view is to encourage people to the extent that they can to go through an exercise of getting renewables as part of our commitment to the decarbonization agenda, just the household becoming energy independent, if you like, and some of them over a period of time can be the net generators of energy as opposed to net consumers. So I think our policy still remains that. And of course, because of load shedding, like I said, I think there's a significant amount of additional demand as a result of the inclement weather if they can't use the solar PV solution for purposes of recharging. And of course, we see that on the demand that is going to spike. But I'm of the view that that question should not arise once we resolve the load shedding problem. And we don't want to allow load shedding to undermine the long-term policy orientation. And that orientation is about getting additional megawatts from renewables onto the stream and also marching towards a distributed grid, if you like. So for me, I don't think there's a tension there. The point is that let's resolve load shedding and that question doesn't arise. On the Quebec matter, yes, I'd ask first for a more detailed report, and the more we get an indication of what the issues are, the more we are getting very, 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 very worried. I was meant to visit Quebec last week. I was given another assignment by the principal, so we had to postpone the Quebec, so we'll be doing it this week. But it's something that requires agency, and I think it's Terence or someone, I'm sorry, I forgot who asked the question. Yes, I think the point is that once we have an overlap of Unit 1 not coming on stream, and then Unit 2 having been, they need to take it out, the net picture is that they would have lost, from where we are, would have lost 920 megawatts. Because Unit 1 is already out, so we don't have the benefit of 920 megawatts. If there's an overlap, there's an outage slip, and then you get to a point where you need to take out Unit 2 because of licensing and compliance issues. It means that you are taking out 920 megawatts. That's a huge dent on our generating capacity, and I know that it's something that Becky, Mr. Numalo is paying close attention to, but I need to familiarize myself so that I also speak with a degree of authority on this matter. I must say that is something that we want to avert at all costs. Of course, we will determine what is at all costs. Like I said, I was meant to go there last week, but we will find time to do that by this week. And then on Ferial's question, no, we are of the opinion that we rode almost the most difficult period. Like I said, I think we have learned from this period now when there was that significant amount of surge, and that surge really added about 3,000 more additional megawatts. And it's not something that we had not predicted in terms of our scenario. The worst case scenario from the demand side was at 34,000 megawatts. So we got to add another 3,000 megawatts on in addition to what was the peak we had experienced to date. And of course, like I said, that was also compounded by the fact that we lost a number of units. The unplanned capacity loss factor, the units that were lost increased by about 3,900 megawatts. So on the one hand, there's a surge of 3,000, and then on the other, you are losing 3,000 megawatts. So the net is that you have lost about 6,000 megawatts, and that's why we went to higher stages of load shedding. And to Ferial's point, no, at this point, we really don't anticipate going to those stages of load shedding. We think we have this under control. Of course, if the situation changes, we'll communicate with the general public. I've never spoke in absolute terms, but essentially just trying to indicate the degree to which we are confident about not going to higher stages of load shedding. And I did open this press conference by saying that we consider a stage 6 load shedding as an extreme event. So we want to get to a stage where we don't normalize it. So everyone must be shocked now that you are at stage 6. That will not get to stage 6 again. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying it's an extraordinary event. So we're working towards lowering these stages of load shedding and also drawing from these experiences. But once more, just to thank the South African public, those who are taking additional measures to ensure that they reduce demand, to thank industry for the efforts that they are making. We're extremely appreciative of this, of their efforts, just to thank the leadership of ESCOM, the board under the able leadership of Mr. Makwana, the executive, the CEO, acting CEO, Mr. Kalib. We are really appreciative, and particular special mention to Becky and the team. I know they're having sleepless nights when we're going to stage 6, on the phone every other hour, just giving me an update, and the team's doing everything possible to address the situation. Of course, extremely disappointed, all of us, that we got to stage 6. That's a psychological thing, when in fact we were able to sustain that period of reprieve, and I did say that it was as a result of the honest and professional efforts of the men and women at the ESCOM, the station managers and the various players, and suddenly you go to stage 6. I think that what that does is to subtract, dilute the message, and essentially people not believing that we are making the kind of progress that we are making. And I did say to Becky, just keep at it. We'll get this right, and we are confident that the trend line, as I've shown you, is still positive, but it's important that we're able to build on the gains that we have made so that we get the South African public out of this situation. Once more, very, very confident, very bullish about the prospects of getting out of load shedding, even a period significantly earlier than anticipated. But thank you very much to members of the media for occasioning the opportunity for us to talk to the South African public. Thanks, Ms. Nomon.
Thank you. Further questions? Yes, that is the last round. Say close. The 3 questions, colleagues, that we have received online, will respond to them on the same platform. The Minister will provide responses. Thank you. Honorable Minister, thank you very much. Colleagues Rudy, Daphne, Becky from ESCOM and from Presidency, we really appreciate the support. To all media houses, thank you so much. The session is adjourned.